Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Cyber Standard Podcast, brought to you by ISACA and the UK Cybersecurity Council. I'm your host, Ameet Jugnauth, Vice President of the London Chapter of ISACA. And in today's episode, entitled How to Apply, we're going to explore the essential aspects of applying for and assessing candidates, as well as the launch of specializations in the cybersecurity field. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our two guests today, two distinguished guests. First, we've got Ethan Duffell. Hello, Ethan. Have I pronounced your name correctly there?
Correct. Yeah, well done.
Okay, brilliant. So Ethan is representing the council today, and also Allan Broadman. And now what people may or may not know is Allan is something of a superstar in the ISACA world. So I guess if Oprah did audit, should be Allan, if you don't mind me making that comparison. But Allan has a wonderful history with ISACA. He's the director of CyberAdvisor London, long-standing member of the ISACA family, incredible track record. I also believe quite recently a new entrant to the ISACA Hall of Fame. Allan, am I correct there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been told Allan's quite modest, so I'm selling him for him here. So, but really excited to have both of you here today and bringing the wealth of knowledge that you have for this discussion, which is becoming extremely relevant in our industry. So we'll just start off with some sort of a bit more about each of you. So Ethan, if you could just sort of kick things off, just share a bit with us and our listeners around your association with the council, so we can just get a better feel of kind of how you're involved and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Ethan Duffell, and my experience with the council was through the Chartered Institute of Information Security. I'm also an ISACA member, have been for over a decade now. But originally when this was all sort of being, mooted around a few years ago with the idea of, well, we need a recognisable body for driving our industry forward, rather bizarrely, I put my hand up and said, yeah, I'm happy to be involved in that. And of course, the one thing I've learned in security is if you volunteer for anything, I can guarantee you're going to be asked to do some work. And I'm fortunate that I work for a very, very forward-thinking organisation, and my boss is very, very forward-thinking. He's been in security since the days of Enigma and beyond, and I think probably broke the first level of encryption. But genuinely, I'm lucky to have pro bono hours available to me for what I do, and my firm were very, very comfortable with me taking part in setting the direction, because it's something that we think there's a tremendous amount of value in. So that was how I kind of got involved, was through the Chartered Institute, which are one of the members of the council.
Amazing. It's incredible, actually, as certainly for people who've been in the industry for quite a while, you get to the point where you want to give back. Right, you've been able to get loads of benefit from others' insights and experience, and there's a point where you really want to give back, and it's amazing how fruitful the opportunities to do that are. So a great example of that. So thank you, Ethan. Allan, same question to you. Just give us a bit of a. Well, I might have stolen your thunder a little bit. I hope I haven't, but maybe a bit of an intro to yourself and. Yeah. Your involvement with ISACA.
Thanks, Ameet, and thank you for your kind words. Really appreciate that. So, long time ISACA member and volunteer. I guess nearly 30 years as a member, probably 25 years as a volunteer at the local chapter level, but also at the international level. And ISACA has been a big part of my personal and professional life over the last 30 years or so. So, I'm absolutely committed and dedicated to ISACA, and just love being involved. The formation of the UK Cybersecurity Council back in, I think, 2018, 2019, there were a group of UK volunteers that were involved in that, people like Mike Hughes and Stu Milton. I was involved in one of the work streams. And then, of course, COVID hit. But, we carried on forward. And, with the launch back in March 21, everything came to fruition. So been very excited to be involved in the initial stages and also more laterally.
Incredible. Well, look, let's get into the juice of the conversation, because we're here to talk about how to apply. And when I saw that, I thought, well, this is great, because we're talking a lot about the direction we're taking the profession in. But if I'm a punter, if you like, if I'm just sort of regular Joe Blogs and I want to kind of progress my career, my development, and the recognition of what I do, this feels like a very relevant episode to provide people with those insights. So, Ethan, I think we'll go back to yourself. So you've touched a bit around sort of, maybe to some extent, the motivation or the opportunity for you to get involved. So what specifically is it you're doing within this program? I understand, you're kind of within that assessor realm. So could you sort of expand on that a bit and how that's relevant to the pilot?
Yeah, so much like Alan, I was involved in the formation work, and I wanted to see that work progress onwards, because there was a lot of work done, as Alan's already alluded to, in the early days. And if I think back to the work I did on the work streams I was on, sometimes it felt like herding cats on Red Bull, because you had so many divisive, different groups all working together trying to achieve the same thing. And ultimately, out at the end of this, I thought, once that stood up, actually, I've got a good chance in, becoming qualified myself as a security practitioner. And I was fortunate enough to be in the first cohort, which was early January, and we were very much finding our feet at that point. And the view was, we want assessors that have assessed before at different levels, and I've assessed within the Chartered Institute of Information Security of new candidates as well. So it was felt that you had to have a degree of an assessor experience to know what good looks like. And I think that's one of the things that I've picked up, certainly in my role as an assessor, is good is a spectrum. It is not either this or this. It is a very big spectrum. And the one thing that you find within cybersecurity is the spectrum grows and changes every day. So what was good last year is okay this year, but there are things that have moved on. And where I sort of play to my strength is I've got a history in assessment. So for me, it was actually the ability to come in and use my skills to make sure that we were getting the right type of candidates that were able to achieve the levels that they wanted to achieve. So if you wanted someone who coming in at a principal level, someone who was coming in almost a very much a chartered level, you knew what the differences were. Because ultimately this is a journey that you start off with. No one wakes up one morning and goes, do you know what, I want to be a cybersecurity professional. We all sort of grow into it, and the barriers to entry within cybersecurity have massively been torn down, because no one decides from the day they're born, I want to be a security professional. That's just not how this works. So having assessors that are qualified in a variety of different specialisms allows you the range, because as a security professional, you might start out, let's say, doing pen testing or audit and assurance, but by the time you're migrating through your career, you might wind up in management, and actually they are very different skill sets. Cybersecurity management is very different to, let's say, pen testing.
Yeah.
So again, your career is going to develop, and the assessors are there as specialists in those areas that know what good and growth looks like as people move forward. So that's kind of what I take from the assessment piece, and that's where I'm comfortable in working with people and saying, okay, where is this candidate today? Where do they need to be a chartered? Where do they need to move to that level? And I think adding that level of professionalism within the industry seeks to differentiate the candidate, but also recognises that they are a professional in their own right. You wouldn't ask a bridge to be built by, let's say, a doctor, but you wouldn't equally ask, just because an architect knows how a drill works, you wouldn't want them doing brain surgery on you either.
Yeah, I mean, very apt examples there, right?
These are ones that I've had to draw on when we've spoken to candidates, and I've said to them, your specialism is X. Yes, it is. Right. So why do you think that this is something that you want to? Oh, because I want to grow and develop into that. Okay, I can now understand where you're at today and where you want to be tomorrow. But as I say, the one that I use a lot is, just because my builder has a drill doesn't mean I'd like him to perform brain surgery.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, that's a great way to kind of put it. It's interesting when you were talking there about the kind of cybersecurity being the kind of natural, or people having a kind of natural attraction to the sector. There's something that's changing quite a lot, though. I think when I look at what's happening in industry at the moment, and it was typified a few months ago. Went to visit my wife's family in the Middle East, and I was talking to one of her nephews, 16, 17. So he's thinking about what's he going to do at uni. And we're chatting away, and you expect the usual kind of the big five professions to come up. And he said, first thing he said is football. He wants to be a footballer, which is kind of, I guess, might be a good time for that where he's from actually. But the next thing he said, I'd love to get into like computer security and like avoiding and combating hackers. He had no idea that's the profession that I'm in. So it kicked off this whole conversation. But it's the first time I've been in the sector for almost 20 years. It's the first time I've ever had that kind of conversation about people who are starting their career. So I think it tells us where we are kind of as a sector in terms of the appeal, the relevance, But to kind of the point you're making there, Ethan, the importance of knowing what you're doing, right, is kind of what we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So really insightful. Thank you, Alan. Same question to you, if you don't mind. Kind of your experience with the pilot program, but in particular, how does that align with what we're trying to do in the UK cybersecurity sector with regards to standardization, kind of driving that consistency? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so just a bit on the pilot program. Obviously, ISACA has always been the go-to place for IT audit. So, I guess we were delighted when the council invited ISACA to participate on, putting the standards together for cybersecurity audit and assurance. So that was, I think, the third of the specialisms to kind of go through the pilot phase. And that work kicked off late last year, around about December time. And we ran through maybe about 3 months or so, working with, again, a group of volunteers in the UK. And what we were tasked to do was basically to put together a standard against which people would be assessed for the specific specialism, cybersecurity audit and assurance. And that has now, gone to, the full cycle, and we're basically using that. And, and so that has been an interesting journey, because it helps us to kind of differentiate, through the different titles, from associate to principal through to the chartered level. So we're that's where we're at the moment. And ISACA has now, that is now the licensing body that administers that particular specialism. So, that's great to have a seat at the table, I guess, and drive this forward. So, ISACA, from a UK perspective, it's a really important initiative for us to be involved in. And yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. Cybersecurity is such it's such an important time for cybersecurity. I mean, I was in Germany last week, and I just got chatting to another fellow volunteer, much younger than me, and I kind of asked her, so what do you do? What do you study? She said she was at university. I said, what do you study at university? Oh, she's doing a master's in cybersecurity. So, which is really interesting, because we very straight away had something in common, and we exchanged, contact details. So I think it's a really exciting time to be involved. And ISACA is obviously has a key role to play in this, not just in the audit and assurance space, but right across the board as well.
Amazing. And I guess, just leading off where you've both kind of positioned that, what are your thoughts around, if we think about the sector in general? So there's obviously a lot we're doing here in terms of putting that framework around, setting expectations for individuals around how they may develop their career path, or the recognition of their capability. When you think of it from a sector point of view, how do you think that can help influence the sector in general? Is it something you think's been missing for a while? Do you think now's the right time to introduce it? What are your kind of both your thoughts around that specific piece? We go back to Ethan. Yeah, you both had the same facial reaction though when I asked the question.
So I was fortunate way back in my career to work at an organisation called the Royal College of Physicians, and Henry VIII was responsible for starting the Royal College of Physicians, because he wanted to make sure that the physicians looking after him were appropriate. And you went in one door for your assessment, and if you failed, you came out the same door, and if you passed, you went out another door. Lovely Grade 1 Lasden building in London. I do recommend you visit it if you ever get the time. But I liken where we are in cybersecurity at that precipice, whereby for some time, when I first started out many years ago, there was ISACA and there was another organisation, which is also part of the council, but it was either one or two roads that you went down for your professional development and career. And I think what we've recognised and what we've seen is actually it's not one or the other. It is a mix. It is a blend of a variety of different organisations all working together to provide a holistic approach to security. Because one approach that people always took was, oh, I'm going down this road, or I'm going to go down that road, and it was okay, an inch wide, a mile deep, whatever that looks like. And actually, that didn't solve the problem. What it did was it drove a behaviour that was not holistic. And I think the one thing that people have recognised now is everybody's pulling in the same direction, but no one's ever had any coordination. And the one thing I see with the council is that it's actually coordinating a lot of the way everybody's pulling. It's setting a strategy, it's setting a direction, it's setting an intention, which is to have the best qualified people in roles in the UK, protecting UK businesses and organisations and charities and all that sort of good stuff. And they're at a certain level. Because, you know, we've all worked with people that have said that they're X, and actually when push comes to shove, they're not delivering. And for me, the one thing that I find with the council, and certainly ISACA and the Chartered Institute of Information Security, is they want good professional people, and a good professional should always strive to develop themselves, because we never end. And the one thing that I genuinely love about cybersecurity in general is that, and there's no 2 days the same, and I'm always learning. There's always a new attack. There's always a new approach to audit. There's always a new approach to assurance, governance, risk. Whatever it is you do in security, what you did last year is not what you're going to do next year.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that you can say about anybody that gets into security, is they're driven by learning. So why wouldn't we ourselves as a collective move ourselves forward? And I think that's where we are with the work that's been done with the council, is it's driving things forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan, I agree with you. You know, it's a really important time to have some structure and allow us to drive this forward in a very kind of formal, well, in a formal way and a consistent way, so that you can, you know, compare like with like. It's not perfect. You know, it's never going to be perfect, but it provides us with that kind of foundation to be able to drive things forward in a consistent basis with proper structure. So yeah, really important that we have that. And you know, I just to a kind of story. I was in Las Vegas about 3 or 4 weeks ago, presenting at a GRC conference on this very topic around, you know, cybersecurity pathways. And you know, I talked about the experience that we've been through with the council, and there was a tremendous amount of interest from across the pond. You know, because I think it's going to be a lot more complicated to do it in, say, the US, but there were certainly other countries, people who came and talked to me afterwards, who were very interested in what we're doing, because they do see this as maturing the profession, providing structure, providing that foundation for us to move forward on a consistent basis.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And I was going to say, I'm reminded of something when I did my CISM. I'm reminded of something the ISACA instructor said to me, is that perfect is the enemy of good. And to your point about it's good, and I think that's where we need to be. We don't need to be perfect, because cybersecurity is not perfect. It never will be. And there are perfectionists that go, this needs to be perfect. No, you just need to be good enough. You need to be good enough for the bad guys to just go, do you know what, it's a lot of effort, I'll move on to the next target.
Yeah, and back to your point, Ethan, about things are changing, ever changing. So, you know, you don't want to be too rigid, because otherwise you're going to find yourself being totally inflexible. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's interesting you picked up on that, Alan. So yeah, one of the things that was running through my mind as I was listening to you was amazing that the structure, the pathway, the expectation, I guess, is probably some of the words that I'd associate with that. I wonder if there's the other side. So maybe to be a bit controversial with regards to what we're talking about here, and you've touched on it there, Alan. Could it be too rigid? What if one of the great things about the sector has been, I used to work with one of the best pen testers I worked with. Used to be a roofer. That was life before pen testing. So one of the great things about the industry, almost because there's been such a lack of capacity, has been people's ability to kind of switch into it, because they've got the mindset, they've got the logic. It's more around the attitude versus the skill, and the skill is, you can train someone for the skill. Attitude, as we all know, and for those who have had sort of even shorter careers, it can be quite hard to find. So how when we structure this, how are we structuring it in a way that still promotes that kind of fungibility that we've seen in our sector, and kind of get that balance between being structured but not rigid? Again, maybe I'll pass it on to you, Alan. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from on this one. We can, we run the risk of being too structured, and in a sense, by having, at the moment, we've got 16 different specialisms, and some of them do cross over. We've got risk and governance, we've got audit and assurance, we've got generalists, we've got and then we've got some of the technical ones. So there's, in a sense, already some perhaps too rigid structure, because not everybody's not necessarily going to fit into a particular box. There may be across several of those specialisms. So there is I guess a danger that we could be too rigid and too structured. So we need to allow some of that flexibility, And we'll see how this pans out, how we kind of move forward on that. But yeah, for me, it's ensuring that we've got some structure, but allowing some kind of flexibility as well, to allow individuals to not necessarily be put into just a very, very specific box. And it's early days. I mean, I'm just conscious that it's very early days yet. So, for example, I'm for a moment sitting within audit and assurance, but I also have some risk management and governance, and so you'll see how that pans out. I don't know if Ethan, if you had a similar kind of view on that.
So yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I got my, so I went through in January and got my chartership for governance and risk, and then I went through and got my additional chartership for audit and assurance. So I see both sides of both governance, risk, and audit and assurance. And you are 110% correct. There is quite a bit of overlap, but also the disciplines are very, very different. So I think the challenge that we have is finding the blend, because you might start out doing governance and risk management, but you'll also blend into audit and assurance. And actually what you'll find is that overlap is healthy. But when you're trying to evaluate candidates, and the candidate says, well, I do this risk work for this type of role, and then I moved on and did this role, and then I do audit and assurance. And actually the tough part is pretty much nailing where the candidate wants to sit, or where they want. And this is the thing about the flexibility, is this is driven by the candidate as to what they think their specialism is going to be. And one of the things I will say is, I looked at the specialisms and went 1, 2, 3, 4. I do those 4. Pen testing, no clue, absolutely, completely useless, right? I started out life as a software engineer, realized I was really bad at it because I couldn't program in Java, and I quit. So I went and did something completely different. I knew I wanted to work in tech, but software engineering, just not for me. But I think that's the thing with the specialisms, is because they are so different, you can do more than one specialism. I thoroughly expect by the time I'm done and everything going well, I will do the cybersecurity management specialism, because that's what I spend my day doing. And when I'm not doing that, I get to play around with audit and assurance and governance and risk. So you could argue that actually, is that all of that could that all be wrapped in a generalist, which is another specialism. So I think the challenge that you've got is the feast is quite large, but it's where you see yourself. And actually, your specialisms will change over your career. And as I've reminded several slightly younger people recently that don't have grey hair like me, or don't have Alan's level of seniority, they all want to get into, I want to be a pen tester. And I'm like, you try it, you do that after 20 years and see how you work out. You're either going to love it, or you're going to realize, I want to get into incident response. You try and manage an incident at 2 a.m. in the morning when you've got a newborn baby. Doesn't work so well. And a lot of it is because of the diversity and nature of our cohort within cybersecurity. Because it is so diverse, you can do that. You can start off with doing those long hours on incident response, helping out clients, really playing and I liken this to the Superman role, where you fly in, you fix the problem, you fly out, and you never have to deal with the fallout on the other end of the client. But also, at some point, you'll change your approach and go, do you know what? I'd much rather do something a little bit more stable, because that's what my life demands right now. So I think having those specialisms and the diversity of them will allow for those types of role changes as your life changes.
But Ethan, also the important point you made there was that each of these specialisms has a very specific assessment criteria, so the standards. So they are quite separate, although there is some overlap.
And as a lot of these standards are aligned to bodies like ISACA and others, it does allow people to also, when they're trying to demonstrate their competency, they can say, look, I've achieved this qualification, I have this certificate, I have these CPE points, which I'm mandated to do. Let's say, for example, I've just done my 40 points this year for ISACA. So again, I'm able to evidence that, but I'm also able to count those towards the council as well.
Okay, well, that's some great comments and great insights. So what I'm hearing is the structure is going to help. The structure is going to give direction. It's going to show what people can do and set expectations. At the same time, there's a lot of flexibility there. So it's structured, but it's organic. It's organic, but it's intentional. So there's a lot of crossovers there. And I think it actually sounds quite exciting in terms of the opportunity. But look, let's move on to what does it involve, right? It's how to apply is the topic of the podcast. So, Alan, it'd be good if you could So we've talked a lot about your experience, and I believe you've got a fair bit of experience with regards to applying for professional titles in the UK, and kind of what challenges you might have occurred or sort of incurred as a result of doing that, or tips that you may give to people in terms of exploring that as an option. So yeah, Alan, over to you. Can you share some of your experiences around applying for professional titles in the UK?
Yeah, so the process is very structured and very organized, and applicants need to provide lots of documentation and lots of evidence of their competencies. And I mean, what I would say from some of the ones I've seen is that you don't want to keep on going back asking for more information. So more is better, I think, rather than just being very brief, because you're probably going to be requested to either provide more information or during the interview stage, dig deeper into those details. So yeah, it's a very structured process. It is, it's people. It's not automated. There's no AI involved so far, as I know. But yeah, so you're really the top tip for me would be, as part of the application, put in the time, put in the effort to put a really comprehensive, detailed application together. Across those 5 different categories of the application, ensuring that you provide as much evidence of your competencies as possible, so that when someone's looking at it at the initial stage, to kind of understand whether they need to go to the next stage for interview, they're able to make a decision based on the sufficiency or the adequacy of that detail that you've provided. The other thing is, it is quite a manual process. So, you've got to be patient. It does take time. It doesn't, just happen overnight for good reasons, because, I guess the council wants to make sure that, it's a quality review and it's a quality process. And, it's relying on, people to come together to kind of review the information, to do the assessments, to go through the various steps and stages. So it does take a bit of time. So be patient on that as well. But I think you can help yourself best by providing as much information up front as you can.
Yeah. So sorry.
Just to say, the council is also very forward thinking, that it recognises that, to Alan's point about lots of documentation, it recognises that not every candidate will be able to provide that immense amount of documentation. And I know that council is thinking a great deal of how it addresses neurodiversity within cybersecurity. So what's to say that what we experience today, and to that point earlier about how things move on, I know the council is looking at other ways of providing that type of assurance on a candidate's capabilities, because we all recognise in our own practices that we don't have, once upon a time was always a security person looks kind of in like this as a cookie cutter, and we know that's not the case anymore. So why would an organisation set itself up and to set itself up to incur problems? And the council has recognised that, the same as ISACA have and the Chartered Institute have.
Interesting. So I guess we've heard a bit about, if you're a candidate or prospective candidate, this is what you would need to. This is how you kind of set your expectations. I guess, Ethan, as an assessor, it'd be good to kind of understand what happens on the other side of the fence. So once we've packaged up our documentation, we've got as much information as we can on our expertise and our skills and our qualifications, we send that over. What is it you're looking for? What is particular skills and capabilities you're looking out for in terms of that assessment?
So typically, once you've done all your paperwork and you've submitted it, and you thought, I'm glad that's over and done with, it then goes to an assessor to review your actual application. That assessor then makes a recommendation as to what the next steps are, and then it proceeds either on to interview, or depending upon what level you're applying at, what happens next. As a reviewer, one of the things I'm always looking for, certainly when I've reviewed candidates' applications, is, have they really addressed, they're using something like the STAR methodology, situation, task, action, response. Have they really communicated what they did? Because a lot of the time, and you do see this on application forms, is, we did this, my team did this. No, what did you do? And that's one of the things that we pick up a lot of when we have interviews and we move to the interview process, that myself and one other competent specialists, because during the interview you have to have one specialist in that specialism as an assessor. So for example, I can assess in governance and risk, and I can assess in audit and assurance. I would have to sit as a secondary assessor if someone said to me, Ethan, I need you on, the pen test team, because I'd be like, I know about security but have no clue on what they do. But whereas for audit and assurance and governance and risk, I'm a qualified assessor in that space. So what I look for is, one, what have you done, and two, based on the criteria that you have read through your application and the situation that you put in your application, if you can actually answer with a really good star-based response in your application, I might not even need to ask you any questions on that subject, which might automatically just go, well, but you kind of hit the criteria just from the form. And that is, ultimately that's a rather selfish assessor's approach, which is I don't need to do as much work. But on occasion, you do find that you get a scenario or someone's written something and actually you think, I'm going to ask a question on that because I think there's more to this. And that is where we come in as assessors, is that we know based on what we're reading, and there's definitely more to that because we base it on our own experiences and our own lived experiences of how we dealt with similar situations. And I was talking to a candidate who was an ex-Royal Marine and was going through a training cohort and was doing some work with a client. And I had a very similar situation to him. I said, well, did you look at this? And he went, I did. And this was my outcome because I knew this wouldn't work with that client. But it wasn't clearly articulated in the form. But that's where the assessment comes in and we ask those questions. And that candidate was very, very successful because they understood that being brief, but actually trying to get as much detail. And this is a skill in general, to be fair, for anybody in security, is communicating what it is you really want to talk about in a short space of time. And it's a skill that takes, I do want to say it takes some time to master, but once you've done that on your form and actually, if it becomes almost a, we're going to have the interview with you and have the conversation with you, it doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like a like-minded conversation with professionals. And that's certainly what I try and bring over when I interview candidates. And genuinely, I always refer to it as a conversation over coffee. I think back many, many years ago when I had my full membership at the Chartered Institute, I came out of it and I rang my wife and said, I'm not sure I got the job. And she went, it was a membership interview. And I went, dear Christ, really? I look back on that experience now and think to myself, it wasn't unnecessarily harsh, but it was very, very intimidating because the people I was sitting opposite were, one of them was a CISO at one of the big petrochemical companies. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, sort of looking up sort of a bit of hero worship. And actually now I think back and I think about the whole sort of conversation over coffee, and I think that's a lot more productive. Also, our job is to put the candidate at ease. The candidate knows this is going to, the candidate has built up this expectation in their head that I'm going to go and I'm going to meet some assessors and they're going to decide what could be a big thing for my future. And yes, it is a big thing for your future, but your assessors are also human and recognize that you will be nervous. You will, have interruptions. You will have the dog come in. You will have the doorbell ring. You will have, and when we did this, because we're still sort of working our way through the results of COVID. We've all got used to working at home. We've all got used to being on conference calls saying, "Like, I've got to go. That's Amazon at the door." So we recognise that, and I think that's one of the things that the council has been very, very clear with was be human. You are talking to people, and what we don't want to do is discourage people that could be leaders in 3 to 4 or even within their own sector very quickly and communicate something that isn't positive. Even unsuccessful candidates, and there may be some moving forward, they should take away a positive experience that they can learn from.
Yeah, Ethan, I totally echo that. The point you made about having a conversation, again, in submitting the application, think about what you're putting in there, because you want to make it something that you can have a conversation about. It's not a test. They're not kind of, taking off things. You basically want to put information in there that people can either explore further, or the assessors will explore further and have a conversation about. And the other thing I think, as part of the assessment interview, you do have 2 people, which is really helpful because it's very much a team effort there. The assessors supporting each other, working through it step by step, exploring, digging into more information, ensuring that you've got enough, from your conversation to be able to make that final decision or recommendation.
Yeah, and ultimately we have to justify our recommendation. It's not just it's not just a decision point on us as assessors. We then have to justify why we think and it is quite a monstrous form of what we've seen, the evidence and our notes. And I learned this when I first did the governance and risk assessment, my notes were very brief. I was trying to get short and sharp to the point, but actually one piece of feedback for me was we need to know more. We need a deeper, richer picture of this candidate, and that takes time from the assessor's perspective. So we're not just trying to ask questions to catch you out, because that's not what we're doing. We're not in the business of catching people out. We're in the business of being able to move you forward. And one of the things that we focus a great deal on is when we complete our paperwork and we recommend someone, we're recommending someone based on our skills, our knowledge, and how we have an understanding of that individual, so that when they go and stand in front of a business or they transact their security activities, they can put their hand up and say, I was vetted by other people in my industry that have been approved as assessors, and we went through it. We went through our own conversations, and they thought I could pass muster, and that I can stick my hand up and say I am a chartered cybersecurity professional, much like a chartered architect or a chartered engineer. And you can distinguish yourself from your colleagues by saying, I put myself through this, and you know what, I've tested my mettle and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Let's just
sorry, Gavin.
I was just going to say, so let's just maybe pause for a second, because there's a lot there, right? Actually, I think we've gone from what should you expect as a candidate, and then what are assessors looking for, and what are the kind of key things that might actually help you in terms of the application. So I'm gonna try and pick on a few bits that I thought particularly interesting. The first one was, don't sell yourself short. So don't if you think it matters, put it in, right? You're not helping anyone, especially yourself, if you kind of go, hey, I did that. That was interesting, but then I'm interested in that. So really sell your qualities and put it all in there.
Yeah.
In some ways, in that instance, more is more, but it's more about how you present it, not necessarily just loading up the content. I think in terms of the expectations, what was quite interesting, look, there are a lot of things where there's a big form to fill out still, right? We're not quite in the world of telepathy just yet, right? One day, maybe. So it is a manual process. There is a lot of paperwork, but hey, actually, it's probably worth it in terms of what the reward could be, but don't sell yourself short. In terms of what will happen on the assessor side, then it's interesting what you said there, Ethan, because I found in my career, particularly as I kind of moved into more senior positions, you're not expected to show you working out, right? But if I think my daughter's in primary school now, we're almost taught the opposite. Right? When show you working out, show how you came to that conclusion, explain it all, then give us the result. So there is a bit of a kind of adjustment when you go from education, like traditional education, to professional education. Actually knowing how to present it is important. There's a lot there. Get to the punchline. Tell us what's important. Tell us why it's important. You don't need to tell me, all the ins and outs of how you got there. I want to know why does this stand you out from the rest? What I also heard in there was the assessment is not just done by a sort of generic assessor. There will be someone who's representing your specialism, and that person is someone who knows what that's, so they'll know what to look for. I'll use a really crass example here. I'm a football fan, and you hear it a lot with VAR. They need footballers to look at the VAR because they know what's really happening. It sounds like that, really. So I'm a governance and risk professional. Actually, I know that implementing governance frameworks in large companies is really tough. And actually, the framework might be simple, the implementation is really difficult. So it's that appreciation of the specialism. So play into that as well. You are going to be presenting to someone who knows what you do. Don't be ashamed to show that you know what they do as well in some ways.
Yeah, and one of the things that we noted, certainly I noted in my interviews when I was having those conversations, no one tried to, because they knew there was a professional who did what they do as a day job, no one tried to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Everybody had a very honest and open conversation. And one of them I remember was yeah, I've tried to do this, but my executives just are not interested in it. And I went, yeah, I feel your pain. I've been there.
Yeah.
But what could you do if they were interested? How would you take it? Because it's not always about what your experience is. It's about what your intentions are.
Yeah.
And that, that is really powerful, because you're getting beyond what you do. And this is also the balancing act of, there is what you do in your day job, and there is what you're presenting about you. And quite often they are very different.
Yeah. That's fascinating, actually. Yeah, it's really interesting to understand the context of where the assessment goes. Like, we've done coursework, exams, and you send it, and it's almost, it's a black box kind of service. You get the result, you don't know how the result was obtained. So it's really great that we're able to offer that transparency, kind of through what we're discussing here. Lots there. I think we could spend quite a lot of time on this particular topic. Maybe we'll just sort of move on. Sorry, go on, Alan.
I just want to make one point again.
Sure.
Was that it's really a 3-stage process. So your initial application goes to an assessor to determine whether it can go to the next stage for the interview, and whether there's more detailed requirement, or a detailed documentation requirement. And then once you've gone through the the interview with 2 assessors, there's another stage where it goes back to a panel. It goes back to a panel who will then review all the documentation, all the evidence that's been gathered, the recommendations, and then that group will make a decision on, the recommendation on how to move forward. So it's a very structured, a step-by-step.
Wow.
It's very thorough.
Yeah, it emphasizes the point you're making, right, Ethan, which is when you've got the badge, so to speak. I know it's maybe not the right way to explain it, but when you've got the professional title, actually, this isn't something you just kind of bought on LinkedIn. This is quite a few processes together. It's been vetted, it's been scrutinized. Actually, it's there on merit, so it kind of really plays into that meritocracy kind of environment that I think we like to create in the sector. Just look, like I said, I think we could spend ages on that, actually, just to kind of what's involved and how's it looked at and what people should prepare for. I think just stepping back a bit now, just to move the conversation forward a bit, and just talking a bit more about the pilot in general, because obviously you both had quite a bit of involvement in there. Maybe kicking off with you, Alan, are there any sort of themes that you're seeing come out of the pilot? Because the pilot's there for that reason, right? Let's try this, let's see what it tells us, and then let's see what we need to do next in terms of taking it forward. So any common themes or lessons that you're seeing emerging from the pilot?
I think for me, coming out of the pilot, a really important piece for me would be, how do we ensure that we keep that momentum going, and we have enough coverage of this, so we get some of the big hitters in the industry coming through this process, so that we can kind of stand it up as, this is definitely something that is taken very seriously, and it's got wide coverage and wide acceptance, and we're moving it forward. But coming out of the pilot, I think we're still at the early stages there. So for me, we're going through a really important, stage now. But lessons learned. Again, just in terms of timing, expectation, and I've mentioned this already, so I'll just go very briefly. But it does take a number of weeks or months to go through this. So just kind of have that expectation that it's not going to happen overnight. And then also, just the awareness, ensuring that people are coming through are, telling other people about it, making sure we get people involved, people embracing it, people adopting it, and moving it forward. So that's a really important piece for me. How does the council, and how do organisations like ISACA and all the others involved in it ensure that we're all driving it forward and ensuring the kind of maturing this within the UK?
Yeah. Ethan, if I could sort of pose the same question to you, but from a slightly different perspective. In particular with regards to the sort of launch of specializations, and any sort of lessons we're learning from that, or even what are we seeing in terms of what that could mean in terms of significance within sort of cybersecurity standardization or professional development? Any thoughts around that?
I think the the one thing that I would probably say before we start this is when I was involved in the first pilot, the one thing that impressed me an awful lot from the council was the continual improvement. So there is a continuous improvement culture. So the lessons that were taken into the audit and assurance work were learnt from the GRC work. So they are very much focused on improving the process, both for candidates and assessors and for themselves and for the council in general. With regards to specialisms, I think the specialisms is, it's an interesting debate, because we all know that, if you think back 20 years ago, some of these specialisms didn't exist, right? And in 20 years' time, they might not exist. There are roles that exist today that won't. Who would have honestly believed? I mean, as a young child, no one ever said to me, "Do you want to be a TikTok star?" Right? That wasn't a thing for me, right? I looked at, I was really, really rubbish at football, so I thought, well, I'm okay at computers. I like video games, so yeah, that seems like a great idea. So, in terms of specialisms, I think what we'll see is they will change over time. Some will merge over time just because actually of natural overlap. I mean, we've identified that with the governance and risk and audit and assurance, but other specialisms will appear. So I think the council is reflective of that, and knowing the council's approach to improvement and change, and knowing that we are a very dynamic industry, that nothing ever stays the same. I think it's natural that specialisms may come and go. Some of them will always be there. I can't imagine management's going anywhere, much to my surprise, but management will always be there. I would imagine, certain specialisms will always be core specialisms. I think what we'll be looking at as we move into the world of AI is there will probably become a specialism for AI-based security controls, and there are a variety of different security threats in that space that need to be addressed. Quantum being another one. So I would imagine that they will come and go. Some may disappear, some may stay, some may change and transform into something new and different. So I think the council is reflective of that, because there was a lot of work during the establishment of the council around the discussions for specialisms. And a lot of people, there was a lot of heated debates about it as well, because you can imagine, well, you're just you're not a specialist bridge engineer, you're a chartered engineer, which again, it's not reflective of our industry, which is also very young as an industry. So we are a very young industry to become a chartered, to charter individual. So, I think it's naturally reflective of the fact that specialisms will change over time.
Yeah.
Just I can't help but think of, you heard it here first, Ethan Duffell, TikTok star.
Listen, I genuinely, one of the things that it worries me is you say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a scientist? Do you want to be a police officer? I want to be a TikTok star. And I just face palm and think, in 10 years, TikTok's not even going to be a thing. When I think back to 2007 and Facebook, and everybody was on Facebook, and now Facebook's like I actually heard a teenager say Facebook's for everyone over the age of 40. And I was like, yeah, oh crap, that's me.
Well, yeah, there's probably a joke about federated access management there somewhere, but that's another day. That's for the stand-up show. We're nearing the end. I guess it'd be good to. We've talked a lot about what's happened. We've talked a lot about what we're doing today. What do you think is going to happen next? We've sort of touched upon the fact that the profession's always moving and new things are coming up and things are changing. But when we think about the future of professional standards, specializations in the UK cybersecurity sector, what do you think the future holds for us? And maybe Alan will kick off that last question.
Yeah. So for me, again, I said it's an exciting time, but it also, if we think of who's going to benefit from this, and we've talked primarily about the individuals, because the individuals go through being awarded the various titles, whether it's chartered or principal associate, but certainly employers. Hopefully we'll have some better kind of structure when they're making those decisions about bringing people on board or hiring people or bringing on third parties. So we do provide a good kind of structure going forward, potentially, which we need to leverage. And then all the kind of the other, I guess, win-win situations, whether it's recruiters or recruitment agencies, they have more of a structure now. So hopefully that allows us, and it's UK at the moment, but on a global basis, I mean, this could become a very good kind of model for moving this forward. based on our experience and how we've kind of moved through this. And this, again, we talked about the great structure, the rigid process. I'm quite excited about this, I think, but it does need proper marketing. We need to get the right people involved and make sure that we leverage off this and get the momentum going, and we kind of build and grow from here.
The world is our oyster, quite literally, right? It's I guess, right?
Yes.
So, thank you, Alan. Ethan, any thoughts from you on that last piece? What does the future? I know it's actually quite a big question, isn't it? Let's just wrap up with easy last question. But what are your thoughts around kind of what's next and what the future holds?
I'm optimistic, if I'm honest with you. I think, given, if I think back 10 years ago, I thought cybersecurity and information security in general were going to go big, but I was never expecting it to go as big as what it has gone. And genuinely, I think we're in for an interesting time. I think the cohort of new cybersecurity professionals that are at university or coming in through T-levels or coming in through whatever diverse entry route they come in through, window cleaning, for example. I think we're in for an interesting time. I think we're gonna grow a skills base that we would never have dreamed of, because typically, and I remind myself of this one regularly. The security people I've worked with in my career have had certain backgrounds, and they've always taken a certain view of things. But actually, one of the things that within my own practice, I made sure that we hired people that had very diverse backgrounds and very diverse skill sets and worked for very diverse organizations. Considering what I do for a living now, I don't think actually having someone with a pure security background is healthy. I think having someone who can look at a problem from a variety of different ways is really healthy. And I think we're seeing that come through now with the candidates we're looking at. And, to me, the one thing that I always remind everyone I ever speak to, whether they're a graduate or they're coming in for a different diverse background, is if you can ask questions and you can think like a bad actor, you will be fine.
Yeah.
As long as you can think like a bad actor, you can find the solution. If you start thinking that, I've put this firewall in and I'm safe, no.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see a lot of that now, because people have realised this is a puzzle solving career. There's a new puzzle every day to solve, and if you like that, then great. We're going to get some really great talent. And where does that talent go? Well, once that talent's achieved its professional certifications and it's got the litany of qualifications, what's the next step? Well, the next step is beyond a professional qualification. It's actually, putting that line in the sand that says, I can stand up against my peers and say, I am a chartered professional.
If I could just come in there very quickly, and I totally agree with on the people coming into profession and the excitement around that. But let's not forget that the UK Cybersecurity Council has those 5 pillars, and we're only really talking about 2 pillars here: the professional standards and the career stuff. But there's the stuff around integrity, and very importantly, the outreach and diversity. So the council has that as one of its pillars, the other one being thought leadership. But the outreach and diversity is a very, very important piece there, and we do need to move the needle, particularly around bringing more women into the profession, and diverse people coming into the profession as well, making sure we're a profession across all people. So and the council has that as one of its pillars. So that's, for me, a really important piece there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's to Alan's point, having diversity, it's in our DNA. If you just look at our specialisms, they're very diverse. So why would we not have that in our people?
Yeah,
perspective. It's all about perspective, right? The more perspective you can get, the more fruitful the conversation.
Yep.
And actually, on that note, I think this has been one of the most fruitful conversations we've had on the pod. Since we started. We could have gone to lots of different places with that. So I think we should give ourselves a pat on the back for staying quite focused, because this could have been the most fruitful and the longest podcast, but we've kept it relatively focused. Look, Ethan, Alan, thank you so much for taking part in this conversation. Massively insightful. My mind's blown here. Like I've got loads of things sort of popping in terms of what this means for the profession next. I guess for those who are listening to the pod, if you want to find out more, there are loads of resources out there. You'll see some links in the description of the podcast, depending on what platform you're listening on. Of course, reach out to ISACA, reach out to the council. Lots of resources available there too. A very exciting time for our industry, for our sector, for our people, and for those who want to become part of the community. So I think that's been a fascinating conversation. And just to sign off, I'm Ameet Jugnauth. This has been the Cyber Standard Podcast, presented by ISACA and the UK Cybersecurity Council. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you.